American presidential elections have a lot of things. Drama, chaos, appeal, scandal. But there's a part of American political life that's slowly been dying off in presidential races. And that's landslides. Now, I'm not talking about the popular vote. I'm talking about the electoral college and how absolutely destroying your opponent there doesn't really seem to be a possibility anymore in American politics. A generation ago, beating your political opponent with 400 or 500 electoral votes wasn't only not impossible, it was almost common. So what happened to American politics to make these types of elections impossible? Well, I think the answer to that question tells you a lot about where America was and where it is now. So let's get into it. So let's actually take a look at what I'm talking about. These are the last 8 presidential elections, and you'll see some pretty big wins here. Clinton got 2 really good, Obama did as well. Trump and Biden arguably had some pretty solid wins on their side, but you'll notice that no one is touching the 400 electoral votes margin. And that is quite a break from what is the historical norm. If we look at the 3 elections before these, the election of 1988, 84, and 80, it is unbelievable the run that Republicans went on. Reagan and Bush Sr. had an unbroken streak of 3 consecutive elections with 400 electoral votes or more, including once when they hit 500. So what changed? This wasn't that long ago. I'm sure the 1980s seems like a long time ago for some people, but for a lot of people around here, including people that are well alive today and living happy, healthy lives, this was less than a generation ago. So what was the seismic shift that led American politics from this to this? Now, you certainly don't need me to tell you that things in America have been a bit divisive as of late. What might come to mind when you think about division in America is protests or acts of violence in the streets, but I want to talk about a more specific type of division, and that's extreme polarization. And when I say that, I'm talking about how Republican areas are becoming increasingly more Republican and Democratic areas are becoming increasingly more Democratic. Aside from the 3 times that Americans collectively just agreed on a presidential candidate and there was no reason for there even to be any formal opposition, presidential elections have always been extremely polarizing and divisive. From Thomas Jefferson describing John Adams as a hermaphrodite to everything that Trump has said, they've tended to keep presidential elections pretty fiery, to say the least. But things were always open to change, particularly how people supported the 2 major parties at the time. Let's take a look at 4 elections around the middle of the 20th century that show just how much popular support would change from party to party. The presidential elections of 1944, 56, 64, and 72 show you just how much things could change. Now, something you might not notice at first, but it's pretty important, is that not a single state in this 28-year period between this election and this election voted the same every time. Not one. What's even more surprising is that 1964 and 1972, 2 elections that only happened 8 years apart, in terms of popular vote, are the biggest landslide victories in the history of either party. Nixon's 60% of the popular vote saw him become the first Republican to ever sweep the South, and also saw him carry 49 out of 50 states. Johnson's win is just as, if not more, impressive. His 61% of the popular vote is not only the best showing of a Democrat, it is the best showing of any candidate since the uncontested election I mentioned earlier in 1820. In the history of contemporary democracy in America, no one has done as well as Johnson. So let me show you something. Do you remember how I mentioned in that 28 years between 44 and 72, no single state voted for the same party every single time? Well, I've got a graphic here from 270 to Win, which is a great website if you want to read up on and look at old presidential elections, change them any way you want to, basically generate your own maps. And this map here shows you every state that has voted with the same party since 1992. What you'll quickly notice is that that is a majority of states. Since 1992, a majority of states, and subsequently electoral college votes, have not at any point broken ranks and gone to vote for the other political party. Not once. This map alone paints a pretty good picture of why landslides are almost impossible for either party today. If you want to win 400 electoral votes, the first thing you have to do is ensure that your opponent wins less than 138. Now, I don't want to sound hyper-partisan, but putting it very bluntly, the Republicans are absolutely dreaming if they think they could ever keep the Democrats in this current political climate under 138 electoral votes. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe let's assume the Republicans find some miracle candidate, someone who performs 10% better in every state. What does that look like? Respectable. It looks respectable. It's the best Republican win in 30 years, but it's still quite a bit shy of 400 electoral votes. But again, just for the sake of argument, what if I'm wrong? What if this next Republican candidate is so good at what he does that he wins not only 10% more in every state, he wins 15% more of the vote in every state? What does that America look like? Again, very impressive, very respectable, a lot of red, but still short of 400 by quite a lot. And the Republicans have a pretty big issue, I would say, with three core states here. California, Illinois, and New York together equal 101 electoral votes, which is almost what Republicans have entirely to lie on, looking at that map from before. But I don't want people to think that the Democrats have it easy, because they don't. They have a somewhat clearer path to 400, but it is a tough one. What Democrats need to do is hold every state they carried in 2020 and win North Carolina, Ohio, Florida, and Texas. Yikes. If you didn't know, Florida, Ohio, and North Carolina have all been getting redder since 2008. And while Texas might see some narrowing of the margins, particularly lately, it's not going to be enough to overturn the Republican majority that exists there anytime soon. If you think this is a problem, the increasing divide in terms of how extreme and unmovable certain portions of America are, I'm afraid I don't have good news because it seems to be one that's only getting worse. That map I showed you of states that have stayed completely the same since 1992, well, here's how states have stayed the same since 2000. These states here have only voted for their respective party in presidential elections the last 6 times. They are not budging. And unless there is some massive demographic shift, it doesn't look like it's a problem that's going to go away anytime soon.